This guy is called Fluffernutter. It's some good names. Some good names on these chaps. So I'm going to paint this bunny in pink. It's yeah, it reminds me of, I don't know if anyone's seen that movie Donnie Darko with the weird bunny, the weird giant bunny that follows him around. I don't even remember if that bunny's pink or not, but I feel like pink's the right color for this bunny, so I'm gonna do some pink. Hope you're all well. It's actually been a while. G'day, Rapid Transit. How are you, champion? It's actually been a while since I've been on stream. I took a little break a few weeks ago. Haven't done too much painting. Just started to ease my way back into it now. So yeah, what better way to start back up painting than painting a pink bunny rabbit? Can't go wrong. So starting off my technique, one of the techniques anyway that I use, we're doing some wet blending here. So as you can see from my palette, I've got a variety of colors that I'm grabbing. I'm not really diluting the colors at all. I'm actually just grabbing the colors fairly thickly, and I'm working them on the model together. So that's actually blending the colors together on the model. So we're not mixing the colors on the palette, we're actually doing it on the figure. So it speeds up time. This is especially useful, this sort of technique, on surfaces that have natural variation texture, such as fur or hair or things like leather. So I tend to use this sort of approach to build up some volumes, some colors, and then we'll go back in and refine a little bit more as we progress. I don't tend to think too much about my colors, what I'm doing with my figures, until I'm actually doing them. I had this model sitting here primed, ready to go since my last stream. Haven't thought about painting it once. So I didn't plan out any colors or anything. I was sitting here 5 minutes ago when I sat down, getting ready for my stream, and I said, I'm going to paint this bunny pink. And I think that approach, that very free-form approach, not making decisions until you're actually doing things, sometimes it gets you into trouble, but most of the time I feel like it results in a bit more natural end result. Sometimes it doesn't work. What's been going on, Rapid Transit? How are you doing, champion? I do apologise to all my American friends. It's such early time for you all, especially to the poor people that have to come and set up my stream. Thank you. How unlucky for you. So just because you've got a textured surface, like a three-dimensional texture, doesn't mean you can't add more layers of texture. Again, with this wet blending, I'm just bringing all these colors together by using natural variation. We're going to add more contrast as we progress. What a legend this little bunny rabbit is. How good. Let's switch to a slightly smaller brush. So yeah, I've been excited to get back and paint these little critters. Also pretty excited for my my next project after we finish painting off these little chaps, which is the the diorama, and then I've also got a big giant stompy robot. So a lot of exciting projects coming up over the next few months. Very cool. So the colors I'm using here, I'm using a mixture of a variety of different brands, but this one that I'm working with right now is Pastel Violet from AK 3rd Gen. It's a very high value pinky pastel-y color. So we're creating a lot of value contrast here before we move into some smoothing of blends, some smoothing of colors by using the airbrush. So we want there to be a large transition from light to dark, because what we do with the airbrush is going to potentially tone that down. With this stage that I'm doing now, you don't have to be very detailed, because again, what we're looking to have little bits of natural changes that we haven't intended on putting on here. That'll help the final product look more interesting. G'day, Sybil. How are you, champion? Okay, let's apologies, this is my hairdryer. This is a magic tool. I have to use it when I do wet blending because we need to dry this all off. So I'm just going to do this very quickly. Sorry for the noise. One of the best pieces of advice you'll get, though, from me, is use a hairdryer. Speeds up drying times. Ah, Marwin, g'day, mate. What's going on? Me too, mate. How good is hair drying? I assume you're using it for your flowing locks, though. I'm using mine for little toy soldier painting. All right, so this will do for our foundations. So now I'm going to use my airbrush, once that's all dried, just to smooth these rough transitions a little bit more. Just using my airbrush to dry the paint a little bit. It's not as effective as a hairdryer, but it works fine. So I want to do the airbrushing on this model, this part of the model, before I start working on the rest, so that I don't catch any overspray. Catch less overspray. All right. Oh no, we've got a camera freeze. We've got a camera freeze. I was hoping this wouldn't happen. Let me see if I can fix it. Stand by. back. We're back. I'm sorry. It's my fault. My camera had a little meltdown, but I fixed it. And when I say I fixed it, it wasn't me. It was everyone else involved. So we're good. We're good. We're going to keep going. So I just did a little quick airbrush with this exact same color that was here, this pastel violet. And we're now going to go in with a little bit of contrast paint and just smooth things out a bit and add some more deeper shadows. So this is a completely new camera rig, so this should be perfect, no issues, perfection. As we all know, nothing ever goes wrong in show business. Unless you're working with children or animals. I've been called both of those things in my time. You're an animal, Deno. So this is a contrast paint. We're using it to add some deeper shadow. Anytime you use an airbrush, what you're doing is you're filtering the colors. And so that's going to have the effect of changing the softness. So it can make rough transitions look smoother. Which is good, because all my transitions are rough. Just going to grab a dark purple color. All right. Let's do some crazy bunny. Crazy bunny. So just before we came live, we were talking about painting burnout. And it's an interesting topic. I tend to do a fair bit of painting in my time. Probably too much, some might say. And every now and then I take a little break, just for however long I feel like I need to. I think it's important that you don't feel guilty about that. This hobby, this fantastic, creative, fun, engaging hobby can be overwhelming at times. You feel like you've got to achieve a certain paint job by a certain time. You feel like you've got to improve and get better, and all of this effort that you're investing, you want to see a result from that. But the most important thing that we do is have fun. And I think if you don't take a little break and give yourself some time and some space to appreciate the fact that we do this for fun, you can get wrapped up in the side of it that isn't as fun. So yeah, I like to take a little break every now and then, and I've actually been on a little hiatus of painting of sorts recently. Haven't really done much painting in the last few weeks. I just came off a pretty big competition for us anyway, here in Brisbane. Big's a relative term. We get like 7 people come to something and we're excited about that. So, but yeah, there was a little competition here called the Queensland Model Hobby Expo. It was a painting competition. I answered a few things. So spent a lot of time and effort and energy on that. And I just felt like I needed to have a bit of a break, have some time. And so I did. And when the enthusiasm strikes, the excitement to do some painting, the fun, that's when I get straight back into it. And that usually doesn't take too long. Sometimes it takes a couple of weeks, sometimes it takes a couple of months. But yeah, it's important you don't feel guilty about that, because it's a hobby. It's got to be fun. That's how I feel anyway. But yeah, I'd be interested to hear how other people deal with block, particularly Marwin, if he's still around, who's a professional full-time miniature painter. I imagine that would be something that you can't really do. Just say, hey, I'm going to take a few months off when it's your primary source of income. I imagine that's a lot more challenging. Deno's a gamer. G'day, mate. Hope you're doing well wherever you are. If you're in Melbourne, hope you're coping well. There was an earthquake in Melbourne today. What a crazy time we live in for there to be an earthquake in Melbourne. Yeah. How crazy is that? The 5.8 magnitude. So not a big bopper. And as I understand it, there hasn't been any reported deaths, just some property damage. But yeah, crazy. Australia's been copping a pounding the last few years. We had the bushfires a couple of years ago. And we had some stuff happen last year as well. Don't really remember. And then didn't we have that rat swarm as well? Yeah, we had this crazy rat swarm attacking farmers in the in the middle of Australia. It's all happening. And an earthquake. Wild. And then here in Brisbane, just having the best time. Painting models. Relaxing. All right, so there's a lot of little gizmo bottles and stuff here. So we're going to do them with a pretty quick technique. But before we do that, I'm going to just paint in all of these other sections on this model that aren't fur. And then I'll do some tricky stuff with the bottles. It's actually not going to be that tricky. It's pretty straightforward, but I can pretend it's tricky. Make myself look cool. So I'm still using a little bit of that wet blending style technique. I'm mixing browns and blues in these areas here, mostly because I want there to be a very clear delineation between the little bunny and these elements that I'm painting right now. So I'm doing that by making sure that we've got a really dark, deep shadow against the pink, which is very bright. Okay. So we're going to do some bottles. So the technique we're going to use for bottles is, I'm sure you'll be all shocked to know, a very quick approach. And it is once again going to use contrast paints or glazes of diluted pigment. So you don't have to use contrast paints, you can use inks. And we're going to start with just some white. So what we want to do to create the effect of this looking like a glass is we're going to try and create a reflection of glass on this object. And we're just doing a very, very bright highlight with a pure white, or in this case, it's actually off-white, so that we can get the sense of this object being reflective. We're then going to use contrast paints to tone that down and create some other colors and elements to the surface, and then we're going to go back in and add some more white. So the reason that this approach works, or the reason that how this is working, is we've already got a zenithal prime on the model so far. So we've already got these transitions on there right now. We've also got little splashes of other colors, like this little bit of purpley color here, already existing on the model. And so what this is going to do when we do a dilute glaze over the top is we're actually going to get all of these colors should become a little bit more harmonized, a little bit more consistent. But you'll still have all of these little natural elements and variations on all of them. So it's a short, quick way of making something look like glass or a reflective surface. He says confidently, hoping that it looks good when he finishes. We'll let that dry for a bit. This is actually a fabric, so I'll just do some fabric stuff. So again, wet blending here, attempting to create some natural changes, shades. I might even add a little bit of blue in here now. So these little doobies are spikes. This little doobie is that a bottle? I'm not sure. I might paint it to look like something metal. All right, just give this a quick hair dry. Apologies for the noise. Cool, so let's grab some colors that we can use to glaze as bottles. So let's use these three colors. You don't have to use contrast paints for this. You can just use a normal paint, a slightly more satin or opaque, not opaque, the other one, transparent color will usually work better for something like this. And we're just going to do a few thin layers of a couple of different colors over these. So it's interesting when I'm painting on my own stream, I don't tend to do as much explaining of things. I tend to gibber on about random things and get distracted. So if you're ever interested in finding out about how I paint things, this is the stream to be on. Because I actually explain stuff. Quick hair dry. Magnificent tool. So you can see I'm not trying to cover up every surface with this dilute glaze. I'm actually trying to sort of pick and choose areas where I put it, focusing on the darker shadows in some spots, the lighter shadows. Again, natural variation. It's my favorite expression. You know where I got that expression from? Cricket. But you didn't think I would be talking about cricket analogies during a miniature painting stream, but here we are. How good. One of the greatest cricketers of all time, Shane Warne. Shane Warne used to talk about natural variation a lot. So these surfaces now look a lot more interesting, but they don't look like glass. So you have to go back in and add this little reflective white. And then all of a sudden they start to look a little bit more like glass. It's not perfect, like it's not a perfect technique, but it's quick. And it can get you some pretty convincing glass. Assuming you get your light placements in the correct spot. So yeah, any transparent pigment will work fine. Any solid paint will also work fine. You just have to heavily dilute it and use a medium of some description. Cool. All right. So let's paint this little dude's eyes. I don't think I talked too much about eyes on my last stream, so I'll speak a little about them now. Painting eyes can be really frustrating, but there's a few simple pieces of advice I was given when I was first trying to paint eyes. The first being that the eye color, the whites of the eyes, it is not a white. It is a grey. It is a very, very similar value color to the skin tone or to your mid-tone. So if you paint your eyeballs in white, you are immediately going to have this sort of effect where they look like this. And that's not what you want. Unless that is what you want, unless you want someone to look petrified, in which case that is what you want. But generally you don't want your eyes to look like this. So don't start with white in your eyeballs. You want to go for a mid-tone or a neutral grey as the whites of your eyes. So once you've got your whites blocked in, you can then add a highlight, and you can add a little bit of this sort of white color that I've been using as a highlight on the top of that. But you definitely don't want the whole of the eye to be in this intense white. So these sorts of eyes, these eyes being prey's eyes with the eyes on both sides of the head, it's a little bit trickier to do. But when you're painting eyes that are both facing forward, predator's eyes, it's much easier to line them up correctly. So I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. But I like to start with a small circle and then work outwards from there. Angry bunny. Angry bunny. You usually want to start your iris slightly higher than central. Have a little bit of the iris go missing at the top. Just tends to look a little more natural. The placement of these irises, it doesn't actually matter. You can usually get away, particularly on this sort of model, where they're on opposite sides. You can usually get away with them not being in the same location. You can't get away with them being different sizes. That will just not work, I'm afraid. So yeah, I'm happy with that. I do just want to add a little bit more eyeball up here. Let's actually add some little red streaky bits. Looks like my cam's still working. I hope it hasn't frozen. I'd be upset if it froze again. I'd cry. I think it's you, mate. Doesn't look like it's frozen on my end, champion, so sort your stuff out, mate. It's all you. Okay, so then what we're going to do is we're going to add a highlight in the lower part of the iris. I always have to remember iris and pupil. I'm always getting those two mixed up. And then we're going to put some color on there. Why not? This bunny looks like an absolute lunatic. I'm going to do some lunatic stripes. Cool. Once that's dry, we're going to put this pupil cool. All right. So we might start being a little bit more precise with some things. So yeah. My approach is to just keep slapping paint on, tweaking elements as needed until we reach a point where I can start to slow down and make things look more finished. I like to call it sketch and refine. And going back to something I was talking about earlier, because I'm very much focused on having fun, I do tend to bounce around. Sometimes I'll be like, I feel like painting this eyeball now, or I feel like painting this area of metal, or I feel like painting this in glass. And so I just do that. I think that's fun and important. So I think there is a strong possibility that we will be finished this guy, or at least very close to it tonight. So we should decide what we're going to paint on my next stream, if that is going to be the next one in this merry band of goblin riding crazy giant animals, or if we should start one of the other models, one of the big giant robots, or start building a diorama. So that's up to you to decide. I trust your judgment. Probably more than I trust mine. My judgment goes to whatever next shiny thing I have in front of me. Tend to go, ooh, So once the black pupil has dried, all we need to do is do the final step, which will make eyeballs actually look like eyeballs. It's the last step that needs to be done. It's the little white dot. It's the most important step in painting eyes because it is the thing that convinces you that they are alive. And if you don't do a dot, your eyes will forever look lifeless and unfinished. But if you don't get the dot correct, small and perfect, your eyes will not look sparkly and alive. All right. Let's get some red for a tongue, I think. Is it a tongue? Surely it's a tongue. It's got like slobber on it though. Wow. Fluffers. It's good. Good little model, this one. Lots of hidden little details. Oh my god, this guy's got a neck chief thing around his neck. What a legend. Oh. These guys are nuts. That's a good question. I actually think the tree is my favorite one of all of them, of these little dudes. So I'm excited for that one to paint the tree. But I think the scariest one's the chicken. Like, no one's scared of a giant bunny rabbit. Pigs are already big. No one's really scared of pigs. But a giant chicken, that is a petrifying thought. So how was everyone's Gen Con? What did you all get up to? I haven't been to a Gen Con. I was contemplating going to one a few years back. We had a Gen Con in Oz a little while, a few years ago. There's a pale imitation of the real thing. Would have been exciting for everyone. The first Gen Con for a little while. What was the turnout like? Was it a big event? Comparatively speaking, I guess. Is everyone excited to get back to Gen Con? I would have thought most people would have been just excited to get there. Was that my fault? Did I sing that before the stream? I don't even realize I do this shit sometimes. I just get songs in my head. Head right. We're living tonight. Bus where there is nowhere to run. We're leaving town. It's the final countdown. The final countdown. That's my theme song before I jump on a plane. Every time I'm about to jump on a plane to go overseas, I play that song. Yeah, the name of the band that sings that song is Europe. And I'm usually traveling to Europe, so just as meant to be. You know, I didn't even realize that I had sang that before, and now it's in my head. So I'm going to actually turn around and blame this on you for reminding me that I put this in your head, because now I'm singing it over and over. Well, I'll take that one. I'll take that one. Bunny. Once that gets in your head, it just never goes. It's stuck there forever. I am constantly impressed at the level of detail on these little plastic models. Very, very cool. Very cool level of detail. Let's do this. So one of the things I think about a lot when I'm painting is a thing called value contrast. I've probably talked about it before, but we often talk about value contrast sometimes without necessarily explaining a few key elements. So for those just joining or those who haven't heard me talk about it before, value contrast, very simply, is light and dark. So every color that we paint with, that we see, has a couple of different properties. One of those properties is value, so how bright a color is. So if white is the brightest color that we have, we could plot that on a little scale of 1 to 10 as being a 10, being the brightest. And black would be a 0 or a 1, having no brightness. So when you hear people talk about the value scale, what they're talking about is a change across the model from light to dark. So one of the things people don't often talk about when they talk about value scale, and usually they mean you need to have more contrast on your model, usually what they'll say. But that contrast can be both in an individual volume and on the model as a whole. So as an example of this, let's have a look at this little bunny's facial area. So this is a high value area. We've got a very bright pink white color here, but we're separating that and putting that adjacent to a dark color. So this is going to be a metal tone. It's going to have a little reflective light, but it's still fundamentally a dark, a low value color. So what we're doing there is we're emphasizing this because this is the higher value area. So it's going to pop out more because of the fact that we've got a dark color beside it. So when we talk about value contrast, we're not just talking about having enough light to dark on the fur, so moving from bright pink down to dark pink, but also having enough value contrast in different sections of the model. So one of the reasons why this rope is very dark is because it's helping to separate each of these different volumes and create a very clear delineation on each of those volumes. When I use the term volume, I'm sure I say it too often sometimes, but what I mean is just an object, just a space. So this little bedroll or whatever it is, a little wrap of fabric, that's a volume. The entire bunny's fur, that's a volume, and so on. So I'm trying to create enough light to dark from here to here, but I'm also trying to create a value contrast where this is different to these bottles, which is different to this pink bit, which is different to the goblin's skin tone. And all of the things that we're balancing, all of the different elements, we're always trying to bring the person who's looking at the figure, their gaze towards the things that we want them to be looking at. So we want to have control over where a person's looking when they look at our figures. Usually you want that to be the face or key detail of the model that stands out. We can have a lot of focal points. You can have several focal points, and usually with mounted models, you'll have two focal points. You'll have both the mount as well as the rider. So for this model, we haven't done the skin on the little goblin yet, which we will do. And that will be very bright and saturated and intense. And then we'll have the bunny, which is also very bright and saturated and intense, be our second key value, attention grabbing bit. So when you're painting figures like this, I do a little bit of display painting as well as models for games, as well as whatever figures I feel like painting. And a lot of the things I talk about come from a display painting background or a display painting mindset, but those fundamentals can still be extrapolated out into the gaming models, and in some cases it can actually be more important to extrapolate these things out on gaming models, because you don't often have the same level of scrutiny as you would on a display figure on a gaming figure. So sometimes creating more contrast on a figure that's going to be looked at from a few feet away is more important, because it makes someone go, wow, that looks super cool, from a table and a half away, because they see the model pop, because there's much more value shift. No, it was for you. All right, cool. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to shift gears and start doing some of the goblin. The goblin. I'm just going to refer to my box artwork. Have a look at the model. Yeah, he does have a handkerchief around his neck. What a legend! Oh, I love it. Oh, he's got little things. Ah, cool. What a cool guy. What a cool guy. Hey, tell me about Waldo. What's the history of Waldo? Is he a dude in one of the games? Or is he just a little cheeky imp that runs around being a pest? As in, he was placed in people's orders, like there was a free little cheeky imp running around in people's orders, or he was just running around hiding in all of your deliveries early on. Did he become adopted as the mascot, did he? Yep. Would you characterize him as mischievous? Surely he's got to have a little model in the game. One of the games. Does he? No, I'm sure you didn't miss anything. I did explain this last stream, but I'll talk about it again. What I'm doing with this green, we want it to be a vibrant green. And the way that I'm approaching this green is making it look anything but vibrant. It's looking washed out, and it's looking lime coloured, and it's looking mint coloured, and it's looking terrible. That's okay. Have faith. Trust the process. It's all going to work out in the end. Probably. What we're trying to establish here is, well, technically I believe it's called a Grisail sketch, which is the old painting technique that it used to be called. Or maybe even chiaroscuro, something like that. But all it really means is establishing the light and dark values on the figure and we'll then use those values for our highlights by doing some dilute layers of color over the top. Even though this kind of looks like a mime right now, a mime goblin. And I actually think that is really awesome. I love it. A mime riding a giant bunny goblin. How cool would that be? A mime. And they call it a mime. A mime. That's just a joke from my Tuesday night board games group. Doesn't matter what board game we play, there'll usually be something that rhymes with either mime, mine. So anytime something pops up, we refer to the Lord of the Rings when Gimli's explaining the Mines of Moria. We could take the Mines of Moria. My cousin Byron would give us a royal welcome. he goes, and they call it a mine. A mine. So anytime someone says something that rhymes with mine, we just say that. It's very annoying, actually, but very funny. So a couple of thin glazes of a bright, intense green over the top of our minty colours. And all of a sudden we have a much more intense skin tone. Is it called Mime Sweeper? Thank you. I'll be here all week. Try the veal. It's really good. Yeah, I'm sorry for that. That's embarrassing. I can't get over the aesthetic of these guys. They are like hillbillies, goblins, riding giant monsters. It's just so legit. This guy's got overalls on. What a guy. All right. So we'll just do something to harmonize the metals a bit. Just give them a glaze of a color that makes them all a little bit more the same looking. I feel like this needs to be more red. So yeah, the fun part about the way that I approach painting models, this very, very loose and work on whatever you want thing is, it's very hard to make mistakes. You can always go back in and correct your mistakes at any point. It's very hard to actually do something that you can't just go back in and tweak. And often mistakes will actually make things look more interesting because you're doing more layers of texture, more layers of contrast. That's a cool question, my friend. I think Wyrd have a pretty unique aesthetic in the miniature field, and that's a hard thing to do, have a unique aesthetic. Malifaux models have always been on my radar for something I'd like to paint, but I've never gotten around to painting them. So, yeah, I think that the unique aesthetic would be my answer to that. It's somewhat of a saturated market these days, the miniature games, miniature world. So to have something that is unique is pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, there's just like every range, right? There's models that I don't like. There's models that I like a lot. Some that I don't feel strongly about one way or another. But on the whole, I think the overall level of quality and level of interest is probably higher than most others for me. Peter Overton. I haven't spoken to that guy in forever. Hope he's doing all right. Very nice man. When are you moving back to Melbourne, mate? We have earthquakes. It's awesome. Yeah, the models do look tall. I understand what you mean. I think that they're proportioned more correctly is probably a fair way to describe it. It's proportioned more accurately. Come on, man. Come back. We miss you. Melbourne misses you. Had an earthquake because you left. All right. We are living in a weird time. Yes, that is true. Oh, halfway there. Whoa, living on a prayer. Take my hand, we'll make it, I swear. Whoa, living on a prayer. Ooh, we gotta hold on, ready or not. That's all that you got. Well, sorry, I forgot I was on my own stream. I'm not supposed to sing on this one. That's not a rule that I've been given by anyone. By the way, that's just my rule. I've said to myself, I'm going to be very serious on this stream. Be very serious. No silly buggers. I've mostly stuck to that. Except that time I made everyone sing. Listen to Evan Polka on the drums. I did it again. I'm sorry. Sorry. Let's do a little bit of this one. If anyone's interested, the wet palette I'm using is from Red Grass. It's a very nice wet palette. I like it. The brushes I use, they're actually Raphael's at the moment. Quite like those. Paints, variety of different brands. Anything I feel like using at the time. I mean, I float between contrast paints and scale 75 and scale fantasy and all sorts. Anything that works. So I'm going to use a yellow glaze over this green to really pump up the intensity, make the green look very vibrant. Bit of yellow. We're going to tweak the color of these overalls so they look a little bit more like denim, which is, once again, my favorite aesthetic. But yeah, I like the overall sort of color palette here. It's a nice contrast between the green and the pink. Most people don't think about complementary colors and think green and pink are complementary colors, but actually, if you get down into it, they are complementary colors because pink is just a desaturated red. So green and pink are actually complementary colors. So this color palette works pretty well, I think. Okay. Do a little bit of detailed stuff on this. This. Thank you. Must be lucky. Is that a very good model? So as I'm sure you've figured out by now, what I'm doing is bouncing around from area to area, just starting to refine sections, making sure that each area has enough contrast. And getting excited painting the things that I'm excited about painting. As I said before, it's all about having fun. And we are going to do some airbrushing after this, because I love airbrushing. It's always fun to airbrush right at the end when everyone thinks you're finished. And they ask you, what on earth are you doing, mate? Why are you airbrushing right now? Everything looks like it's finished. Why are you airbrushing? It's just a flex. It's just a mad flex because I can. I'm going to airbrush because I can. How do you like them apples? Yeah, the level of quality on the plastic is really, really impressive for these guys. Let contrast paint do all the work. It's the team so far. Look at them go. Yes. All right. Just do a little bit of hair drying. All right. Not bad for an hour and 40 minutes, I think. Well, I try to share as much as possible, but the absolute best piece of advice I think I can give, and I say this to many people all the time, there is no substitute for practice. Simply putting paint on your brush, putting it on the model, repeating that process over and over, that is the absolute number one thing you need to do to improve at painting. All right, let's do some little bits of ropey. Rope, 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 ropey, 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 rope, rope, ropey, 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 wood, 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 ropey. So much rope, making me hiccup. Ropey, rope, 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 ropey, rope, 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 ropey, rope, 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 ropey, 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 rope. If you want to watch me sing the ropey song for the next 4 hours, come and join the stream. I'll stop singing the ropes. All right. So remember that rule I said about painting eyes and not using white? There are situations where that rule doesn't apply. The main situation when it doesn't apply is when you have really small eyeballs. This comes back to one of the things I was talking about before. Value contrast. When you're painting eyes, there needs to be a shift between light and dark. If you don't have a light and dark shift, then you won't have enough of a visual separation in the eyes. So the only time when you ignore my rule about using white is when you're doing really, really small eyes, because those need to have a clear separation. Now I'm going to try and do teensy weensy eyes. White dot. Good. Good. Yeah. First try. All right, red handkerchief. Red chief around his neck. Boom. All right, so I think we've got this gun bit to go. So this little bit's in wood usually. A little bit of wood grain. And then this bit is usually in metal. So we'll do this bit here in metal. Just realised I've been very quiet. I've been involved in painting. Just very excited about painting. So I apologise for not talking much there. Oh, the camera's going super weird. That was awesome. Sometimes I just get wrapped up in my own little painting world. Legend. That was cool. It's like watching an old TV. Yes, what's the debate around the office bin? If an Australian says you're a treasure, it means you're a wonderful human being and they appreciate you. Would you like to know any of the other Australian sayings and what those sayings mean? Have you heard flat out like a lizard drinking? It's one of my dad's favourite sayings. It means you're very busy because you're flat out like a lizard drinking. As in you're so busy that you look like a lizard stretched out on the ground, drinking from the watering hole. Flat out like a lizard drinking. There you go. Of course, it would be remiss of me not to talk about Australian slang and express my favourite Australian slang, which is another one that my dad used to say unironically. It's become my motto. It is slightly inappropriate, so I apologise in advance. We're not here to fuck spiders. We're not here to fuck spiders means we're not here to waste time. We're not here to muck around and do something ineffectual. Let's get stuck in and have a go, get something done. So it's become my motto. I love it. I think it's the best expression. All right, we're going to do a little bit of matte varnish in a second. And have a bit of a look at the overall piece and see how we feel. Probably pretty happy at the moment, but let's have a look. Just a quick hand dryer. All right, let's do a. Oh, little things. Separate this here. Separate this here. Give us a little bit of this one. All right, let's give a little varnish and see how it looks. May do a little bit of airbrush tweaking, I think. Do some colours. So yeah, because I use a variety of different paint ranges with different finishes, I find it helpful to just use a matte varnish towards the end of a paint job, and usually at the end as well, just to help bring all of those finishes together. Sometimes you have shiny finishes that makes something look a little bit more contrasted or a little bit less contrasted. It's just those different finishes can trick your eye. So by taking everything back to a very matte finish, you get a much better sense of where the model's at. Pink Bunny was a great decision, by the way. What a fantastic decision. And what's even better about the Pink Bunny is it ties in with the pink bow on Miss Piggy, this little one. How good. All right, well, I think that's pretty much everything we need to do. And again, my process is pretty quick and pretty straightforward, but this can be a base for you to keep working on. I mean, if you wanted to continue working on smoothing out elements and making everything super smooth, you can actually do that with this sort of base. You can continue to refine and work within all of these colors, smooth them out, harmonize them, add some more contrast, change things, drop things, tweak things. So it's a very relaxing process for me because you don't have to worry about making mistakes. You just enjoy what you're doing, having a bit of fun. So yeah, I like it a lot. Let's just put this little mark there. And on that one there. You know, in Brisbane we have a beer. It's called 4X. So this is an oddly appropriate dude for me. I like it a lot. That's very nice of you to share my socials. How wonderful of you. You didn't need to do that. All right, I reckon that's good enough for a finished little Goblin Rider for the moment anyway. We'll probably do a little bit more tweaking when we have some bases. We'll do some bases maybe next time. Maybe some swamp bases. Show you how I do those. But yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Two little team. This one's got pink bows. This one's got pink skin. So we might have a pink theme happening here. always a professional start to go with a pink theme. Awesome. Well, I hope you've enjoyed. Hasn't been a super long stream, team, but I don't not here to fuck spiders. So we'll call it a night. Have a fantastic day if you're in America. Have a fantastic afternoon if you're in Europe, and have a fantastic night if you're in Australia. See ya.